Thrilled to announce our next speaker, Todd Eaton, head of DevOps at the Weather Company. Todd brings in a wealth of experience, 20 years managing and performing, full lifecycle implementations, supporting the daily operations that go into web apps, managing critical information systems, and so much more. Today Todd's going to talk about how they do things at the Weather Company. His team is responsible for getting the weather to millions of users, as close to real time as possible. To contextualize, the environment that the team operates in, localized weather stations are sending in weather updates that need to go live like every 5 to 15 minutes. Today Todd will talk about how their team has evolved to meet those needs, to thrive in a high functioning environment. He will go through weather.com's journey, going from manual to building more robust testing strategies. I'll let Todd take it from here. Over to you, Todd.
Hey, thanks, Jay. Appreciate it. Welcome, folks. And yeah, thanks for joining my talk here. Hopefully you'll find it interesting. A couple of things before we start. We're in that work from home world, and anybody who sees the video, yeah, that's my roof right above my head. And yes, I've hit it a couple of times with my head, so that's nothing new. Don't worry about that. Usually when I do, though, it's because I got a cat that comes up and jumps up on my lap and decides to put its claws in my leg. So hopefully the cat won't join us this time, but if by chance one of them do, just let you know, it may be coming. Yeah, what Jay was talking about is I'm head of web operations and DevOps for the Watson Media and Weather consumer products. So that's a pretty long line of pretty much I run the DevOps and QA teams for weather.com, wonderground.com. I do a little bit of DevOps for the apps folks, the mobile apps, native apps. They don't have a whole lot of operation side on it, but whatever little ones they do, I handle that as well. Just a little background on me, that picture that's on from the Continental Divide Trail. Avid hiker, and I go out and do a couple of hikes now and again just to, get out and about. All right, so yeah, here it is. There's my picture. So that would kind of help. That would kind of fill in for you. I do a little bit of hiking. I try to do a couple of days out in the woods. All right, come on up. Yeah, why not? Join the party. All right, let's see. So getting in this, what we're kind of going to look at is, first of all, we actually had an issue with weather.com and wonderground.com, and we're going to identify that issue going forward. We're going to see where we came from and how we wanted to change. There was things that we wanted to do that were differently. And usually that's when you're doing any transformation, be it testing, DevOps, development, whatever it is, you usually have an issue, and then you have to have a plan or a goal of where you want to go from there. From that, we're going to talk a little bit about our testing and release process. How we do our testing, how we release things, because they're all so tied in together, especially in our team. The testing group and the DevOps group are tightly coupled because they both report up into me, and we tend to work real close together. How we changed our testing and release process. We're going to go into the different areas, our merges, which was one area of issue, our tests, how we expanded our tests, kind of looking at the results, how we did how we're looking at our results, and how just getting this massive amount of data and trying to make decisions quickly to do releases comes out of that. And then talk about our deployments and how we do deployments at Watson Media and Weather. Lastly, we'll go over our lessons learned and talk about where it's taken us and kind of the results that we've seen from all this. All right, identifying the issue. The first big one that we had, our release history, and this might be similar to a lot of different people. Large and infrequent releases. I started out with the Weather Channel and the Weather Company in 2012. and came over, and we were doing these massive releases, back then in 2012, like once a month, right? And we were doing them at 4 o'clock in the morning, and we'd have like 20 things in a release. From the data that we were looking at in here, we're looking more about 2015, when we were doing probably three times a week, sometimes 4, depending if we had a hotfix or something in there as well, which we did, and I'll bring that up. We were averaging about 6.5 features per fix when you looked at it. Doesn't seem like a lot, but it can be, because it was causing a lot of issues in itself. Some of the data that we had on there, so you saw in 2015, we did 162 releases. We pushed out 1341 features and fixes. 2016, we went 192, and we pushed out 1508. So, it was getting just not tenable, at all. We were doing these big monolithic releases, and it was really causing us a lot of pain. What we were finding with that is we just had an unacceptable number of failures, right? As these big things were getting pushed out, they were just slapping against each other. The interdependencies of features would they exposed all the failures, right? The whole integration piece of it, when you have all these different services or different apps, and some of them, we had like monolithic apps that we were kind of combining together, and they were just exposing one failure after another when they were deployed in a single environment. And we just didn't have enough test coverage to catch all those, right? If you're relying on manual tests and you're just trying to catch everything, you just can never do that. So we started collecting data, and our percentage of failures, so in 2015, we were at 21%. It was just horrible. 1 out of every 5 was some kind of failure, where we either had to back out or we had to fix forward. 2016, we started making some progress a little bit, and we're starting to get things on the right way, but still just not enough. And it was really painful for whenever we released. So sat down with our development manager, the release folks, some other folks in the group, and we identified some goals. The first thing I wanted to do was I needed to reduce the size of our releases. The 6.5 to greater features and fixes in a release was actually way too much, and it just caused way too much churn, and the testing on it was just too hard. So I wanted to really reduce that size. Give me a couple of things, and then we should be able to attack those pretty easily. With that, we needed to increase our test coverage, and we needed to cover the top browsers and devices, and those things change all the time for us. We're kind of settling in a little bit, the new market, but back in 2015, 2016, and I'll kind of show you, it was, I mean, we were kind of going through a change there that really precipitated us to get better test coverage going on. We also wanted to increase the number of releases to try to do it multiple times a day. Right now, we're pushing out, we're now down to a microservice infrastructure. So we're pushing out multiple times a day. We've got, in fact, I was just doing a release earlier, it was probably about an hour ago. I was helping with one because I do some of the security patches that go in. And we were doing a release and probably pushed out, 15 things, I think it was at that point, 15 different releases, and they take a couple of minutes each now. So they're really fast, really quick, not hard to do. And the last thing is I put this in our checkpoint, which is our goal, our employee goal system, and told my folks we need to reduce our release failures down to less than 5%. You saw that we were at 21 and 15, and I said within a year and a half, we need to be down to 5% and see how we can go from there. All right, so testing and release process. The thing, I love this view. This came from the Agile Testing Pyramid from Agile Coach Journal. It's a great picture of like a testing type and how people see it, right? Because in this manual world where we were coming from, we had this manual test through UI. We had a whole bunch of them, and we would throw bodies at this and all that. We had a slight automation suite. You know, we were doing the old school Selenium tests and just, you know, having a couple of test engineers write test cases, but a bulk of our testing was done manually and done, you know, through the UI. The unit test was an area that we really had, you know, we just didn't have a lot of coverage. Now, in turn, I explained this to the development organization and to the other groups that if we really want to prevent bugs and to get better release, we got to flip that pyramid up to what normally look like it. And our unit tests need to be the biggest piece of this. We are slowly getting to that. We have added more and more unit tests and helping to use our hybrid framework to write more unit tests. We get the automated acceptance tests. So as each build comes in, we automate, or as each feature comes up, we are automating this as we go along. So we automate our acceptance tests as we can continue on. We have automated UI tests. That's our regression suite. And we let those things, and we push those along. And then lastly, we do exploratory testing. The one thing in this picture that we don't really have is in the automated UI tests, not only do we do functional testing and that and using our hybrid framework, but we also do a visual UI test. And we've come a long way, and that has helped us out tremendously because the UI test confirms that, hey, yeah, we're doing what we should be doing. So how we were doing with our testing. So we're in the process of changing our testing to go from this manual heavy to more of an automation, more unit tests and more automated tests in the visual. Well, it kind of has to fit into our release process. And our release process, this is one of the big things that I had to go through when I first came in. The other DevOps leader and myself, we got together and try to come up with a plan to say, okay, this is where we're going to work on things. So in the squads, we have squads. Most people call them scrums, but we do the Spotify model. So we have squads. Developer completes the code. Testers are doing their feature testing, writing their test cases as they go along. In the squads, they're also doing accessibility and performance tests. Those are a big thing for us at IBM. We make sure that our products are as accessible as possible and make sure that they're running at its peak performance. Senior dev conducts a code review, marks the PRs, PR approved. Tester has tested it, and they're, you know, as they're going along, kind of puts it in an environment, make sure, yep, it looks like it's pretty good. Our tests are running, we're doing good, marks that as QA approved. We have a release boss. They review everything that comes in. Anything that goes in as test pass, the release boss is checking those out, making sure that we're able to push those PRs out the door. We don't quite have a CI/CD yet. There's some things that we have to implement still to get a true CI/CD, but we're pretty close to that. The release boss marks out the ones that they want merged, they merge them up. And they can kind of help control this, and that's something that I'll talk about a little bit later on. They kick off the linting, unit tests, all this other items that go in, building the service, Dockerizing, that type of thing. And then it comes out to make sure it gets deployed out. It says the release boss deploys, but it's really pushing a button. It's just pretty much going out there on its own. We kick off a bunch of tests as they go out. These tests run, and they do cover the areas that we want it to run. Right now, we probably run more tests than we need to. We don't have it quite narrowed down into just the items that are changed, but that's something that we're working on as well. Overnight, we run full regressions on multiple different devices and browsers. During the daytime, visual regression, we rely on that a lot. And then and we'll do partials. We'll do a partial regression on the big devices and browsers that we have. Lastly, Release Boss verifies the results. And you'll see some of the tools that we have later on about how we see the results and how we can check it and make sure that what we're seeing is, you know, with web tests, there's a little bit of variability in it, especially for us. We do some of the checks that we have, they use live APIs. And with live APIs, we're subject to changes in the weather. And things will display a little bit differently. We have to make sure, we roll with it most of the time, but we kind of want to make sure the live APIs are working properly with the environment that we've got. So the Release Boss will verify the results, notify DevOps, say, yep, we're getting ready, and DevOps keeps an eye on it, and then pushes the button, opens up RFCs, and which are requests for change for us, that sends out to the support department that says, yeah, we're making a change. If you see anything funky, you please let us know. And then at the end, after it goes through all the pipeline, then they close it out and the RFCs are closed. So in that, there's a couple of different areas in that we wanted to change up and to automate and make a little bit better. Looking back at our goals, we try to line them up with those goals. So in the merges, the first thing we wanted to do is reduce that size of releases to 2 to 3 features. That's where I talked about the Release Boss, right? We accomplished that. We put in introduced the role of the Release Boss. That is a designated person right now that actually does that role. They are like the traffic cop for releases. They make sure that we don't step on each other. They make sure the services get deployed in the proper order, or they get the right services get deployed for the right fixes, that type of thing. And they do a great job at it. We have cross-trained other members of the team so they can do that role, but right now it's one person, and we try to keep it, keep that knowledge as one, because that allows other people, the developers, the product owner, whoever, to have one throat to choke, if you would, right? That says, hey, what's going on with this release? How's things going with it? And then we can identify that person. The Release Bosses manages the releases. Like I said, they're the traffic cop. They may delay releases depending on results. If they see something funky that comes back, we don't have a true stoplight on it where it'll just stop it totally. We actually do some checks. If we see some results that come back that are invalid or that coming back as failures and we didn't expect, we'll go and do some manual checks, or we'll bring it back to the developer and the squad QA and explain to them how they're doing that, or what we're seeing, and then they can check on their own environments. So the Release Boss, excellent role on that, and something that really has helped us organize our releases a lot better. Testing, we needed to increase our test coverage and cover the top browsers and devices. To accomplish that, we developed a checklist. So I kind of put this in here, and I was thinking about this more. For those people that are going from a manual to an automated process, the first thing that I highly recommend that they do is develop a checklist. Have those things in there, and then as you're working your checklist, identify those items that you constantly do and that are repeatable. And those are your ones that you can identify for automation. And it makes it a heck of a lot easier to identify what you want to automate and how you want to save some time, and also show some wins. Because you'll have your checklist and you'll show all these different items that says, hey, I'm checking the UI, I'm checking performance, I'm checking accessibility, blah, blah, all these different things. And then you say, hey, I'll automate this piece. Normally it takes me an hour to do this. I automated it. It takes me now 10 minutes to do this. Hey, there's a win. And that is important to bring that up to management, to show your ROI when you're doing your automation, which is always a topic that comes up in trying to get automation rolling. We introduced a hybrid framework to increase our test cases and coverage. you know, I heard a little bit about the talk beforehand, and the frameworks. This is important because if you could only hire so many test engineers to write these test cases. So if you're writing a Selenium or an Appium test case, the throughput is pretty minimal because it's based on how many people you can hire in that role. If you make a framework and make it adaptable so other people in the team can gain that skill set and write their own, then you will gain so much more, and you will have a lot more throughput on that. So it is important to have a hybrid framework to increase our test case coverage. And then we added Jenkins, and we started running our tests through Jenkins and through a pipeline, and incorporating it with other pipelines so that we could roll, when we do a deployment, they'll roll out. Lastly, I had to work with the analytics team and determine what are the top devices and browsers. I get a report every month. We go over it. We kind of check and see where we're sitting on all that. And it's really helpful to kind of tailor our tests to the most popular devices or browsers that our users use for weather.com and wonderground.com. So kind of looking at it, here's our checklist. This is a bit of an eye chart, I can probably tell, but I wanted to capture all of those items. So for a new feature, we have a bunch of different items that we go through. We can put this in Jira. It gives you a bunch of different subtasks, and the QA person can go run down and identify, hey, here's all the things that I've done for this feature. This is real helpful for the product owner. So the product owner will see that and say, yep, all my testing is done. I'm able to move off, and this thing is ready for deployment. And it kind of gives them a good view of where we are with the testing on a particular item. Like I said, taking that checklist and coming up with an automation strategy for it, we developed a hybrid framework. And this hybrid framework uses a lot of the keywords that you would find in any other testing framework, but it gives it in such a way that our squad QA people have learned this, and we give them documentation that shows, okay, if you're going to try to write this, this is how you'd go about writing a test case. And here are the keywords that we would use to pick those things up. So in this one, we have like a click, and then that's a click action, a type, you have a type action. You can check an element through either CSS or through an XPath, things like that. So we came up with all these different keywords and came up with a dictionary to kind of help our users develop the test cases as they went along. A sample of such is, I'll give you a couple right here, where we have verified date is displayed in the hourly page and verify an ad call is made on the home page. In that, we do a go-to action, go to the page. We're doing an index to make sure that we get the right item. We're making sure that it appears, and we're doing an assertion and that the assertion is correct. As we're doing this, we developed these for the testing group, and now we're giving these to the developers to say, hey, if you're doing a unit test, you could probably use this framework and just use your unit test there, and we could run them on our headless framework, our headless grid, or on something like a BrowserStack if we need to do it on a particular device, but probably wouldn't do that for unit tests. Unit tests are usually run on our headless grid, and that way they run quite fast. The ad call one, I like to add that one in there because here we're, it's a proxy test, and we're looking at the HAR file, and we're actually grabbing a call out of the HAR file to make sure that it's what we're seeing is properly there. So another one is assertion, and it's good to have on there, and something that we could lend itself to the developers. So when we run these guys, we actually use TestRail for that, and we'll put them into a test plan. The squad QA folks, they actually come up with these plans, and they'll identify which tests they want to run. Depends on what we're doing. If we've got like a special project that we're doing on something, or if we're, or if it's just regular regression. But they're writing these test cases, apply them into a plan, and then run them as they go along. And then we run these, as you can tell, on multiple devices, and then we can see the differences between, hey, one's a good one and one's a when does another device have an issue? And that way we can go back and kind of drill into it and find, okay, yeah, we've got one that we had an error on. Here's the failure that we came up, and we import out of the framework all the error statements out of that to kind of help us troubleshoot it. So in this particular one, we've got a failure on a step, on an assertion displayed for that particular one on iOS, but it passed on Android. So we can drill into that and see, oh, okay, I see where it is. And also, you see a couple of those, we have an automated BrowserStack. We can select that link and actually go to the video or the screenshot that in BrowserStack and actually see that running. Jenkins, anybody who's been in Jenkins, this is pretty simple. This is what we do. We check out, and we have different plans, and we check them as we go in, and they run pretty quick. You see one on the bottom took 45 minutes. That's our longest one. That's doing full regression type of thing. But most of them, 5 minutes, 9 minutes, something like that. That's a good group of tests that we run, and then we can get some results pretty dang quick. We publish out a report, and we can use that report, and that actually publishes the results back to TestRail as well. So I talked about analytics, and I worked with our analytics groups about the device usage. And this chart, starting back in 2016, this is our usage of weather.com by our end users. And you saw back then that mobile, desktop, we were like 50%, and mobile was a little bit behind, and then we had our tablets, right? Tablets really hasn't changed much. A little bit of dip, a little rise, it's pretty well settled out. It's like 4% or 5% of our users, something like that. But mobile is where it changed dramatically. That convergence, we started seeing it separate, and we were interested in that. That convergence was actually a hurricane, a month of a hurricane. For us, when a hurricane hits, a lot of people scramble over to weather.com because they want to watch videos and they want to see the news about it. And, that's a pretty big event. I've got my VP, she's amazing. She always calls it the Super Bowl. And whenever a hurricane comes, she goes, okay, guys, this is our Super Bowl. She's a big American football fan. And we're like, okay, yep, we're ready for it. And we always have to increase capacity, increase our testing to make sure everything is running well. And as you can tell, that convergence, we had more people using desktop, but then as soon as that was over and the hurricane season was over, then it kind of separated out. Right now, yeah, it's pretty close. We're about high 70s, almost 80%, probably closer to 80% of our users are mobile now. The mobile devices have taken off like a rocket. And so this helps us in determining, we changed our whole testing strategy. We were writing a bunch for large screen and desktop, and now we run more for the mobile devices, and we make sure that we run on multiple mobile devices to ensure that we have the coverage. Results. So we run all these tests. We got a bunch of automation going at it, and we wanted to look at the results and increase the number of releases that we had multiple times a day. But the only way that you can do this is if you can make rapid decisions on this and make sure that you understand, hey, am I good to go? Something I heard a talk about if you know about CI/CD, and when you put in, when you really feel comfortable with a release, that you have the shaky hand on the button, right? If you bring somebody in and they are confident that a release will go, their hand should be nice and steady as they hit the button and as it goes out. I was talking with a development manager and said, I can tell if you guys really did unit testing and you tested your stuff, because I'll have you guys push the button. If your hand shakes at all, I'll put a little sensor on your arm. And if you're shaking, I'm not going to deploy it, that type of thing. So increasing the number of releases, getting that confidence that it goes, it takes a lot. So the first, or not the first, but one of the things that we did was we had to add visual regression as part of our smoke test. That's a real good cue in our world that, yes, what you're deploying is not going to mess up the screens. It's working out. It's displaying what you want to see. We also added comparison charts, and we do things, and I want to show you this because the way that we do this, we were talking about how the different metrics of your test pass and your test fail and what they mean and what you really need to look at. So I want to share that with you so you can see how we do it, and it has become fairly successful for us. Lastly, is we monitor our device usage to make sure, and kind of include that. Wanted to show that because we monitor our BrowserStack usage as we go along to see that we're not overloading our environments and that we're able to run our tests. Visual regression, I actually had to just change this slide. Before we were using A-Shot, which is an open source screen capture tool, screen diff tool. But BrowserStack purchased purchased Percy for visual regression, and we have started playing around with it. We've gone in, as you can tell, this one's, well, it's a few days old, 948 different results. I kind of like how this is working. I gave some feedback on it of, it'd be nice on the management to be able to archive some stuff and a couple other things, but this is really a cool tool. It takes the DOM and it creates the page, but within itself. And for us, that is, that makes it consistent, and we're able to kind of work our way through this or see this so we can see the differences between, in this particular instance, our pre-prod environment, our staging environment, and our production environment. In this particular one, our nav has changed. We've got a addition in the nav on the staging environment that's not on production, and we have somebody review those so they run, either overnight or during the day. One of the testers will, release boss will review it. They'll put a note if they find a discrepancy that they weren't expecting, and then the rest of us can go and check it and say, yep, we're kind of expecting that or not. Just a little point on this. I am finding that this is actually pretty consistent. Our A-Shot, we have a little bit of differences on there, but we've kind of settled in on Percy, and it's actually working really well. We're still in a side-by-side comparison, trying to make sure both tools are working, that Percy was being an improvement, but so far it's working really well for us. The comparison chart. This is the one that I thought brought a lot to the table for us. So this is a Grafana chart. It's got our automation results, and you see these plans that are up top. And what we're doing in those is, so I've highlighted one, so it's the BrowserStack mobile, right? And it was at 97%, and we had 7 failures. In this particular one, we can see where we were yesterday versus where we were today, or the last run, actually. So in this particular one, we had a run on the 17th at 2200, and then we did another one at on the 18th at 0030. And in that, we had a drop. So we had one fail that passed before. And when you drill into that, so we had those 4 categories there: the failed pass, the fail, fail null, and fail untested. The fail, we're not too worried about, because sometimes you'll have a fail that you'll open up a bug and it'll take a couple of days to fix. So it may fail after multiple ones. The fail pass, and how it's got an underline in there, that actually links up into the test plan, actually into the test case, and will show us the failure. Those are the guys we're really looking at. So if we have a little bit of off on there, the release boss or a QA folk can go in there, look at their fails today that passed before, and see, okay, do I have a problem? When that number explodes, then we know we really got a problem. When it's onesie twosies, yeah, we check it, but a lot of times it's, okay, it might be a caching issue or something like that. And then we have our grid monitor, and the grid monitor, you know, it's a good visualization of how we're using it. And our goal, and I keep on this with our automation folks, is, you know, I want to use it as much as possible. Here's the BrowserStack usage, and I got so many licenses, I want to use as much as I can, as much as I can, you know, as many licenses as I can, as much as I can, and get my money's worth. And this is how we adapt. And if we overload and we see a lot of wait times or things like that, then we can adjust when we run our tests. All right, deployments. So we wanted to reduce our release failures to less than 5%. So to accomplish that, we're gonna publish a deployment results monthly in a product status review meeting, which I'm going to in the next 24 minutes, as I gotta show my results. We have a change advisory board, and any failures that come out of that, I have to go and explain that at the change advisory board. It's good to be held accountable as you do things. And then lastly, we wanted to add performance goals to each individual related to this goal. So in conclusion, we reduced the number of features in each release. You saw that, or we had, you know, well, you'll actually see that, where we actually reduced our number of releases, but we actually reduced the number of features in the release, but actually increased the number of releases. So to make sure that we were putting out the things that our product owners wanted. We increased our test coverage to include more devices, because we looked at the spread and saw, hey, our mobile browser, or our mobile browsers and mobile devices needed more coverage, so we increased that. And then we increased the number of releases to multiple times a day. So we make it smaller features, doing multiple ones, and actually having less risk in each release. And then lastly, reduce the failure rate dramatically. So to kind of show this, you see the releases. So 2015, remember we did 162 releases. Last year we did 1,149 releases. So, you know, that ought to tell you, that's a couple a day, right? And that's what we were doing. The features, as you saw, actually rose because we did that, and we're able to keep it to like that 2 features per release. We reduced the risk and made it easier for us to verify what was going in a release. In turn, our failures plummeted. So we were at the 21% failure rate back in 2015. Last year, thankfully for my team, they reached their goal, where the 5% was actually a 2018 goal, and that was where they got underneath it. Last year, I ratcheted that guy down to 3%. They actually hit that at 2.13. And 2020, just to let you know, we gave it down to 2%. Failure rate, and we are actually on pace for that. The release boss is managing the release as well. The testers are testing more, and they're adding more automation and checking more devices and the features on different areas, so we don't have those failures creeping back up to us. And we are doing a much better job going forward in this. So overall, you know, that's our journey. And if I have to bring anything with this, I would have to say, you know, if you're going from a manual, heavy manual, to an automation, get your checklists in order, understand what you're going to test, automate those things, and then give yourself some tools so you can see your results and make decisions against those results, so that you can deploy with confidence and make sure that what you're doing is of the utmost quality and strongest product that you can have going out to your users and to your customers. All right, I think that is it. Jay, right now I'll be ready for a little question and answer time. Oh my God, there's a bunch.
Yeah, there, there are a bunch of questions. Thanks a lot for Todd. Great talk. It's good to see under the hood what you have going on. Let's get to the questions. So a bunch of questions around your setup and tooling. Can you quickly summarize sort of the stack you use for testing?
Yeah, so our hybrid framework is based on Selenium. So it's Java Selenium. We've wrote it in such a way that we use those keywords, right? And they interpret it as into WebDriver. We use Grid to pass them along into either headless framework or into BrowserStack, which is our two primary areas where we'll run our tests. The headless stack is used just for primary browsers, you know, the Chrome emulator for mobile, and that's about all it can do. We do a little bit of Firefox on there. BrowserStack helps us with the various different devices. We test heavily on Samsung. Samsung's a partner of ours. And we have to do Google and Apple and a couple other things. So that's pretty much our stack, if you would, to run that.
Awesome. Thanks for answering that question. We had a few questions around visual testing, which I think you've answered. So one follow-up to that question, can you talk tell us a bit about the value versus the maintenance costs of sort of maintaining your visual testing?
Yeah, the value. So the big issue, the big thing with us is, and where we're trying to improve is the new rules that are coming out. GDPR, CCPA, LGPD, which is the Brazilian one. We have to make sure that we are showing those controls, those pages, the screens that allow users to opt in, opt out, and do they save, you know, are they able to get their data? Are they able to strip their data? All that stuff. There is so much emphasis on that currently. And the way, I mean, you try to do that in a functional regression, it's really hard. If you see that, if you see the screens and you're able to screenshot it and say, hey, on 7/21, this is what a German user would see on a Samsung phone. I mean, that is so invaluable. So by having that in place and being able to record that, you know, the investment, it's actually not that bad. The Percy one, because it's built in with BrowserStack, I mean, it's licensing and all that stuff. You'll have to, it's totally up to y'all. But implementing a visual regression and having an archive of this is what we saw when we did it is just tremendous. And showing from the UI standpoint, it pays for itself in spades.
Awesome. So since we're on devices, what benchmark do you use to make decisions on, you know, which devices to test against or not?
Yeah, I kind of brushed over. So we have some proprietary stuff. We use we have an analytics team that uses different analytics, and they produce a report that says, hey, from our user base, and the way I look at it is the number of unique visitors to our site. Number of unique visitors per month, we'll stack rank them, and it'll tell us like which ones are the most used and which ones we need to concentrate on, because they adjust, you know, month over month. You know, it may be a you know, iPhone 11 might be 1 month. Well, actually, we're probably iPhone 10 was riding for a while, and then all of a sudden iPhone 11 started popping up. Or, hey, here comes you know, here comes a OnePlus phone is actually starting to show up on the list. All right, we better add a OnePlus into BrowserStack testing to make sure that it shows up.
Awesome. Another question around, we have a few questions around your squad and setup. So you mentioned the release boss. At what level does the release boss sit at in your team? Is it at the squad level, at the product or business unit level?
Yeah, they actually cross squads. So the release boss we'll have multiple squads, and as they'll they take a holistic view over all the things that are ready for deployment and make sure that they've, basically traffic cop it and do it across multiple squads. We've just found it easier for us to do it that way. In the past, I had them separated by platform or by product, because I had one guy he just wanted to do his own releases, and I was like, okay, well, I'll let you, but I'd give it to the release boss if I were you. But yeah, he wanted to do it himself, and By the way, if he's on, Ifty, go back to work.
Another question, how big of a team, a QA team do you have to support your release model?
How big of a QA team? Ours is pretty small. We've got, I probably have 10 for the web group, I think, altogether. And that includes our automation framework folks. Not including, I've got some ads testers that I work with. They don't actually belong to me, but they work with us. So, that's the other piece of that inverted pyramid. And something, I keep emphasizing with my development peer is, there's this pressure of reducing your size, reducing the number of employees, right? It's always that way. And if we're going to do that, we need to have that good base of unit testing. So if there's a problem, and right now our quality is actually pretty decent, but if we get to that problem where there's a quality issue, then it's not really, do you want to add more bodies or do you want to add more tests and you add more coverage? And there's a lot of back and forth on that business people take into consideration, and you have to kind of let people determine how best they want to handle it. But for us, we're pretty lean on the number of testers that we have in the squads and who can cover it.
We have a question around someone who's in a small IT company who can only has one QA. Do you recommend the QA being in charge of releasing the builds?
For one, that might be tough. Hopefully that group has a decent DevOps person. The original role for us was the release manager or release boss was actually a DevOps role. And like I said, they're playing traffic cop for the most part. We moved it over to QA because we were doing some migration of our platform to IBM Cloud and to OpenShift and some of the products that IBM has. So it's, that role where it used to belong to DevOps kind of came to QA because I just had a person that was able to do it. For one, that would be pretty tough. I would probably, but now with that being said, you have to have a separation of duties. Another piece of that I've got in my wheelhouse is I do security and compliance a lot for the weather.com and wonderground.com. So the big thing in our compliance is a separation of duties and the right access. And you should not have a developer deploying. You should have either a DevOps or QA. In the case of one QA, I'd say give it to the DevOps guy.
So we have time for maybe one or two more questions, and there are a lot of questions. Guys, we may do a follow-up to make sure your questions are answered. But quick question for you, Todd. When you started the transition from sort of mobile to manual automation, how did you address your current manual testers? Did you train and upskill them?
Yes.
What do you?
Yeah. We definitely upscaled them. Yeah, I wanted to give all my folks a chance and prove that they could do the next level, and they did real well. I mean, and I worked with the automation architect to say, yes, let's make this in a way and let's document this so that they can grow in their career, because that's you want to give that opportunity to everybody, right? Be able to grow in your career. Yeah.
Another question, in your end-to-end tests, how do you handle dependencies on APIs that are developed by third-party systems?
Yeah, that's the tough part. So we've got a couple of different API environments that we can use. End-to-end they may use a non-prod to begin with, and then, but we test on prod APIs, and we do that for a reason. We want to make sure that whatever goes out the door is going to work well with a production API. We've also looked at stubbing. We stub some data, but that's usually early on. It's not the later tests.
Awesome. The failure rate that you mentioned, how is that measured? Is that across sort of the different types of tests, like your automated test suites, your visual tests, or is it purely functional?
Yeah, so the failure rate in that chart is primarily automated. We have moved, our manual testing is done at the feature level in the squad while it's being developed. We do very little, we do manual checks afterwards to make sure a feature is in place, or that if we see a failure that we have to check on it. But right now, the failures that you see in there were an automation failure, and we go and review that. It would be tough to include manual and automated in the same bucket.
So I'm going to take the last question. What was the reason for the higher failure rate earlier, and how did you sort of bring it down to the level that it's at right now?
Yeah, the 21% failure rate had to do with too many things getting crammed into a monolithic release that just collided with everything, and we didn't have enough maturity or tooling to catch everything. That's the bottom line on it. When we reduced the number of features and made it easier for us to verify, yes, what's going out is actually what's going out, and those things didn't collide with a lot of the different services or different other apps, that's when we actually saw a great drop in our failure rate.
Awesome. Folks, thanks for adding in all the questions. I know there are some unanswered ones, but we'll try to follow up with answers to those questions. Todd, fantastic talk. Thanks for coming on board once again as a speaker and sort of sharing what you have going on at the weather company and sort of pulling from your playbook. It's really insightful. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Jay. Nice talking to you again, man.